Hi there, Neil McGee with UVA School of Data Science. In this video, I'd like to show you quickly and briefly how to get set up to start working in AWS, Amazon Web Services. And this video assumes that you have your own account or you've been given access into a shared group or institutional account. Just to recap quickly in data science, while we might be working with the cloud, it gives us access to very powerful things very quickly, very inexpensively, without having to buy them outright. The first of those is compute resources, so a variety of sizes of computing servers and so on, operating systems. Access to storage very affordably, whether that's hard drives attached to the compute instances or whether it's just sort of infinitely scalable storage in the form of S3, where we can just put things and get them out and keep them for very, very little cost. Third is a variety of databases, maybe relational or NoSQL or vector or graph and so on. And then finally, this whole other host, a raft of other services that are just incredibly useful, can help us do integrations, can help us do machine learning and AI and development tasks and so on. So really, there's two paths that we will use to work with a cloud provider like AWS. And this is true for Azure, GCP, and all the others. Is that first, there's a web console that we can sign into and use like any other website. We can see the resources we are using. We can create new ones. We can manage the existing ones. We can delete them and so on. Any of those tasks, however, are also possible through programmatic means. And the first of those is the command line tools, the AWS CLI, and then what we call an SDK, a software development kit. So if you work with a language like Python, the SDK is called Bodo 3. But if you work in C++ or Rust or Go or JavaScript, there's a SDK for every single language. And so I want to show you explicitly in this video how to get set up with those two paths because they're just so powerful and allow us to automate and kind of reproduce things over and over again. Keep in mind, however, with the console, you're going to just sign in with a username and password. And we all know how to do that sort of thing, so we don't need to cover that here. When you create your account, you're going to establish a password and you can sign in. It's a good idea to set up multi-factor authentication so nobody can really easily get access to your account. But this path we're going to assume you know how to do. And so what we need to set up for the programmatic means on the right is an access key and a secret key. And these are sort of longer than usernames and passwords. They should be treated just as securely. And they're going to sign and authenticate every single request we make between the CLI or Bodo 3 and AWS. So they help us authenticate and authorize our access. So let's get those set up. So first, to install the AWS command line interface, the command line tools, just Google for AWS CLI. I'll put this URL in the notes for this video, but if the first hit in Google will take you to this page. And really, the best and most easily supported way is just to get the installer for your operating system. So here's a Windows 64-bit installer. Here's something for Mac OS. And here for Linux is another option. There's another way you can install it as a Python package, but I would recommend you use these standard releases from AWS. It's going to download a package. You run that installer, and it'll walk you through everything with all of the options. And you'll know that it's working when you switch over to a terminal, and you just issue the command AWS, and you'll get this little note about the proper usage of it and how you use subcommands and so on. So that's great. So we have the tools installed, but now we need to authenticate to it. So let's switch back over and sign into the console, which I'll go back just a page here to show you. This is the main homepage of the console. And if we want to set up a pair of security keys, we're going to go to the upper right corner to My Account, down to the option that says Security Credentials. And then we're going to go down to the Access Keys section. You are allowed to have two sets of active keys at any given time. You can deactivate them if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and create another access key. And it says, oh, root access should not be allowed for access keys. That's a good word for a real production account. This is just a testing development account I'm in. So I'm going to go ahead and override that and say, yes, I understand. But if you're in a big organization, this is truly not wise to do. So it's because the root access has full power to do everything versus a sub account. So let's create that key. And now we see an access key, and if we peek at it, and I'll delete this after the recording, here's a secret access key. These two things go together like a username and password. And I'll warn you, after we say done here, you will never see this value again. You can't get it out of this console again. So one option is you could download a CSV, and that'll have the two values in it. But what I'm going to do is just initiate the configuration for the AWS command line tools, and you'll see that it's going to ask me for these two values. So what I type is AWS configure, and it's going to say, oh, what's your access key ID? And I'm going to say, here's my access key. And then what's your secret access key? And I'll copy that from here, and I paste that in. And then it's going to ask my default region name. And yeah, I want to use US East 1. That's the primary Northern Virginia location that we work with most of the time. And then a default output format JSON is what I would like. So I hit that, and now I can see, if I do a test to list out all of my buckets, there we go. I can see that I have all of my regular teaching buckets here and available. And that's great. And actually, if I flip into a hidden folder called .aws, it's in my home directory. So cd:/.aws, you can see there are, well, at least two files. I didn't even know about Workbench here. There's a config file and there's a credentials file, and this is where these values are kept. So it's really useful. So our command line tools are authenticated now. And the great thing about this config and credentials files, these two files together in this hidden directory, is that all of the SDKs, whether I'm working in Python or Go or Java or Rust or whatever, they all know to look in the same exact place for credentials to sign in and authorize the requests to AWS. So let's go ahead and set up Bodo 3 now and just show you how a simple connection, a simple client to AWS is created. To install Bodo, it's just a normal Python package. And so I want to go with the proper command here, saying python 3-m pip install Bodo 3. And it's going to go real fast because it's already installed here. It's telling me there's a new version of pip available. That's great. But notice that Bodo 3 itself is made up of, or it relies on, several other packages: Bodo core, JMIS path, S3 transfer, date utility, URL lib, and 6. And so it's really it's kind of a constellation of other packages that are needed for Bodo 3 to work properly. So that's great. It's installed, and if I clear this and I kick in Python 3 interactively, I can now import Bodo 3. And I now have all of the methods and classes and options available that Bodo 3 gives me, which is the exact same entire world as if I were using the web console itself or if I were using the command line tools. They all can do all of the same things. So last thing, and then we'll call it a day, is how do you set up a connection then using Bodo 3 to talk to AWS? And we do that on a service-by-service basis. And there are a few different ways to do this. Kind of the lowest level, the most granular, most detailed option is called a client. And so let's create a client object in Python using Bodo 3. And the way we do this is we name an object. I'm going to name it S3 because that's the service I want to connect to. And that's going to be, it's going to use the Bodo 3 library. And it's going to use the client method, or really the client class, to create this object. And it's going to create a connection to this one service, S3. And the client can only specify one service at a time. And so it's not really reusable for all the services across one instantiation of the object. You just create an object for each different service you want to talk to. One object of each of those classes. So if I want to connect to S3, I create this line. And this is kind of a convention, is to name the class object. the same thing as the service you're going to talk to. In the same way, if I wanted to talk to EC2, I could say bodo3.client, EC2, and there I have that. And what you'll notice, even here in just the simple terminal, is once I type S3 in a dot, I can hit a tab and I get all of the available methods for just that one service. So I can get things, I can delete things, I can copy things, list things, and so on. So that's really, really useful. I can then take this and I can say, okay, let's create a variable called response. And from the S3 client, let's just list my buckets. And if I just print my response, you'll see I get a whole bunch of stuff back. But here we go. Here is the name of one of my buckets. Here's the name of one of my buckets. Here's the name of one of my buckets, and so on. So this is this long JSON payload that came back to me when I made a request. Just like I could say, response equals EC2 describe instances. And now I can print my response. And I'm going to get back everything about my different EC2 instances in my account right now. So that's really the simple way to, this syntax, this convention of naming an object the same as the service. If I can type right. And that gives me the methods available for that. One of the other options you might see besides a client is called a resource. You could actually create a bodo3.resource. Resources also go service by service for a connection, and they're a lot less granular. They're a lot more high level. They kind of abstract things a bit more. So just the really common tasks you might do with S3, for instance, the resource can do it really quickly and really easily without a lot of options and parameters. And so it's kind of an even faster way to kind of get cooking. But I like the client because it gives you all of the options at the very finest level. So that's it. That's a quick overview of working with the AWS command line tools and the SDK for Python named Bodo3. Hope this helps.